So hello, Joanne. Thank you so much for joining us today to share some thoughts for this seminar. For those colleagues who haven't met you yet, could you just tell us a little bit about your role at Teach First? Yeah, if you could just introduce yourself, that would be great.
So, hi, Joe. Thank you for inviting me to share this space with you today. So, I'm Joanne. I'm a subject development lead, which means that I work with our English trainees. And my other role, as well as developing our English trainees, is as the BAME Affinity Chair. Which means that I do lots of work in the diversity and inclusion space at Teach First, supporting BAME colleagues, trainees, and in our kind of wider education space.
Okay.
So that's me.
Fantastic. What an interesting role. Joanne, I've invited you along today to really talk a little bit about Teach First's Missing Pages report. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what that report was, what that report included, and just a little bit of background to that report, really, if you could.
So the Missing Pages report was published in September 2020. And you'll remember that just before that, in June, there was the murder of George Floyd, which I think most people will remember as being a time where there was a huge amount of interest around Black Lives Matter, around disproportionate representation, about lack of diversity within the curriculum. So the work that Teach First had been doing about this had started before that, but it kind of all culminated at the same time. And the report found that the main exam boards in the UK had no set texts that were written by a Black author. We also found through our research that 75% of English teachers were very concerned about the lack of diversity within the curriculum. Not only because they had students that came from diverse backgrounds, but also teachers that were in areas that were not diverse and wanted to make sure that their students were ready for the next phase in their life where they would be able to understand the experiences of all people. So the report set out some really interesting recommendations. The main one being for the exam boards to include writers from Black backgrounds in particular. They also wanted a change in school curriculums, in particular history, English, but actually all of the subject areas, to start to look at the impact of Black scientists, Black mathematicians across the curriculum. And there were calls for the curriculum to be decolonized in many ways and looking at what is quite a challenging history in terms of the UK and its links to colonialism. And the report also highlighted the need for more leaders that come from diverse backgrounds, teachers that come from diverse backgrounds, and also encouraging those who are already teachers to kind of just pick up the mantle, to feel more confident about talking about issues around race and supporting colleagues so that there are resources, that they are able to work with other colleagues, join with other colleagues to get recommendations just to build up their confidence in that area.
Fantastic. Well, that's a really comprehensive overview of the report. You're an English teacher. That's your background. It is as an English teacher, Joanne. So which elements of that report particularly resonated most strongly with you as an English practitioner, would you say?
I think I'll go back a little further. In fact, myself as a child in a classroom,
yes.
That I never ever was able to hear stories or plays or anything that had a representation which looked like me. There was never any stories that we covered in class. And I was lucky enough to live in a part of Birmingham where the library started to stock books, actually typically African-American books, for young readers. And that's when I first sort of understood that, oh, actually, there are books with children in it that look like me and have that whole experience. But as a teacher myself, there were never any books on the curriculum that referenced Black experience, apart from Mice and Men. And I was never comfortable delivering of Mice and Men because of the use of the N word. And for my students, especially white students, really didn't want to hear the word being said in class and themselves didn't feel comfortable. So, you know, even when I taught in schools in leafy Surrey, where there were no Black children, I was the only Black teacher, they recognized that actually a book like Of Mice and Men was quite traumatizing. So it's been a long time coming that we can be in a space where we can share stories from lots of different cultures. Joe, you'll remember, like me, that we had the Poems from Other Cultures. Do you remember that anthology? And that was a huge change because we then had poems like Half Caste by John Agard and Hurricane Hits England by Grace People. You know, so it was all of those, Search for My Tongue, looking at all of the experiences of different cultures. So it's been a long time coming. We've had a few poems, and we've had some very courageous English teachers who have created schemes of work and resources looking at that. But in terms of our Key Stage 4 offer, there has not been set texts that really looked at the experience of especially Black culture.
I mean, I always think that English teachers, I'm very biased because I am one myself, I always think English teachers are quite an exciting bunch of individuals. You know, I'd probably count us among that. Why do you think this has happened? You know, the figures in the report, you know, say 98% of English teachers would like to see more diversity. You know, that's quite an that's a huge statistic from the report. Why do you think that diversity of text choice is missing from the English curriculum? What's at the root of it?
I'm afraid that there are some big barriers, budget being a huge one. So if you have a stock cupboard, as we know, you go to an English department, there's the stock cupboard and there's lots and lots of text there. If you then have to go to your senior leadership team and suggest that you are going to purchase a whole new, however many sets of something, it's going to cost quite a lot of money. And that is something which many schools, the schools that we predominantly work with, there would be implications for that. And let's remember that the driver for many senior leaderships are going to be exam results. So they are going to be looking at the texts that are on the set text list. And if there are no set texts which are diverse on that list, then they're not going to be able to really come up with a strong argument about being able to buy lots of texts. So it does take a lot of courage, an awful lot of courage, to be able to present that as an option. But thankfully, there's changes that are taking place. So we now have textbooks that both you and I worked on. So we have textbooks like Through Our Eyes and Who We Are that have extracts from diverse texts, that have resources, that have lesson plans, that have contextual information for teachers so they can feel really confident about delivering diverse texts, which maybe out of their realm of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that sense, given that there are those barriers in place, what would you say could be some of the first steps that you could do within an English department or within an English team, and certainly perhaps for those colleagues who are very new to the classroom and very new to the profession? What are the first steps we can take to address this?
One of the first steps, and this is something which we always talk about, is networking. Networking with other English teachers. There are some amazing groups. So there are groups like the Black Curriculum, the BAME Ed Network. There are English teacher groups that exist on Facebook, Instagram. Social media has opened up the opportunities for us to network. Resources are out there. It may mean that you just need to have a little look, or just to put your question in a forum on something like the Times Ed forum. Ask, I'm really interested in looking at poetry that comes from the Caribbean. Can anybody suggest? So really, it just takes you asking for support, and the support is there. English teachers are amazing at networking. I'm forever amazed at how much sharing goes on. People are so open. They'll share the PowerPoints, the questions, the sheet, absolutely everything. Online, even on the Teach First Missing Pages website, we have webinars where we have talked about the topic, giving people suggested text to read, approaches to text. So we've looked at texts like, Children of Blood and Bone compared with The Crucible, for example. So people can really look outside of the box. So definitely there are opportunities to do things which initially may be small, but it builds up a bank of resources. But in particular, there are lots of textbooks around now, which we will share the information from, that give you a really good place to start. And if you feel yourself that you have not read many texts from diverse authors, our trainees will remember during Summer Institute that we set a target around that. So upskilling yourself, saying, okay, once a month, or I'm going to make sure that I've read a poem from a diverse author and looked at the context of the poem. Setting yourself some targets to learn more is a brilliant way of making a start if you're a new teacher.
Thank you so much, Jan, for sharing those thoughts. I'm going to finish with a question that I've not prepared you for. So that's a little bit naughty of me, really. You've mentioned some authors there. But just to finish with, for our trainees, if they were thrown in the deep end tomorrow with a lesson to cover, what would be your go-to poem that they could take into a lesson just tomorrow, or just to look at even after this seminar and think, wow, I could make a great lesson out of that? What would be one of your favorites as a personal finish?
I think let's go for a middle. So let's say year 9. So year 9 class. So right in the middle, I would probably pick Half Caste by John Agard, because it's so animated. It's so lively. It explores so many different themes. So you've got looking at accent and dialect, attitude to that. It looks at race. It talks about migration. I think the themes within it are they're quite universal. The idea of being in a place and trying to understand what your identity is and how you can be your authentic self. So regardless of whether you are Black, white, whatever your background is, those universal themes work within that. But also the resources for it are fantastic. You can go online, go to YouTube, and find an amazing clip of John Agard reading that poem in all of his finery. There's so much passion, there's so much joy there, a very complex subject when you really dig into it, which would cover a number of lessons if you really wanted to.
Oh, thank you so much, Joanne, for joining us. And I'm sure we're going to give everyone some time to have a look at that missing pages report and reflect on it right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.